With the recent fixes to Temerario and Saltado, I thought it was time to revisit a Rafa Ricochet build, and now it is even stronger than before. This is one of my fastest drill site clearing setups. If you're not familiar with this build, we're using mostly Rafa's skills to boost our indirect projectiles, which include our cannons, and using mostly Jacob's weapons, but also show you some variations of things you can use. Starting out, I'd like to say this just up front. This is mostly a mobbing build, but you can do some bossing things, and I'll talk about that here in a second with the skills. Mainly for our skill tree starting out, we're going to want to use the double auto shot. This gives us the shotgun pellets to deal increased damage, but they have a chance to ricochet, and that's going to be a huge factor in dealing damage. We're going to use the Instinto to get the critical hit chance on our Peacebreaker cannons. That's going to play into Werga, making sure our action skill is up more often and throughout the most amount of time. You can also do some interesting things with using like volatile hollow points and replacing this from double auto shot, and then using things like the Stray and being able to get a ton of extra damage from Barrage. And I'll talk about that more in the class mod section. But for the most part, we're going to use Instinto with double aught. And then if you're bossing, you can use Bullet Buddy Deluxe. Use that with the Torgue Stickies. If you're not familiar with this, essentially when your action skill is active, if you hit your action skill button again, it's going to freeze your ammo for 8 seconds. With something like a bod with Stickies, a Chaosin, you're able to put a ton of Stickies into the bosses and then be able to detonate them all at once for extended damage. Going down the skill tree, we're just buffing our guns and our fire rate here at the top. Also, we talked about Werga. We're going to do some increased skill damage with Maestro and then El Valiente. There's Vitriol. We're going to use the Hot Slugger for the most part, so every single shot coming out of this is going to deal bonus corrosive damage. That's giving us extra damage. Already talked about Barrage with the splash damage. Asymmetric Warfare. This is where really the meat of the build comes in. So Asymmetric Warfare and Errant Spark, and what they're doing is asymmetric warfare is increasing damage for indirect projectiles, which include all of our Peacebreaker cannons. So all of our cannons give extra damage. Then again, if we're using a Jacob's weapon and that bullet ricochets, that's giving us indirect projectiles. Then if we're using things like Fireworks Shield, which I'll recommend using a Fireworks Shield, we're going to get indirect projectiles off of that, so those deal increased damage. Then we're going to go into Errant Spark. This is all indirect projectiles deal bonus incendiary damage. So every time we fire the Jacob shotgun and get a hit and it ricochets, that's going to deal bonus incendiary damage. Then on top of that, if we're already dealing incendiary damage, we can deal bonus damage out of this. Now, something like a Hellwalker works well with this, but because of Saltado's change and because we're going with a +5 into Temerario, then it's really difficult to handle the Hellwalker when it comes time to actually shoot it. Then we've got Temerario. This is going to give us increased damage, and that's up to 100%. So then we're going to go into Saltado. This is one that got buffed in the last patch yesterday. And before, if you put 1 skill point in or 2 points in, it did the same amount of damage. Now if you put in 2 skill points, you can see we now have an overdrive bonus of 150%. And that's going to go into our Temerario and our Barrage bonuses, which Barrage will get up to like 88% extra splash damage. So Fireworks, if you're using the Hollow Point variant or Hollow Point augment, that's going to get splash damage. So you can do some really cool things. Now, when I was talking about class mods, if you go into your inventory and you look at class mods, you can also put on something like a Philanthropo, giving us +5 into this skill here. And then use something like the Stray sniper rifle combined with hollow points, and you can essentially stand in one location, spray the Stray, and let your rockets all do work all together and do a ton of extra damage. But the best overall for what we're trying to do here is the +5 into Temerario, and then also into the +1 for Saltado. We have 2 into Midnight Oil. This just makes our Peacebreaker cannons a little bit stronger. Going into our inventory, we're going to use the Hot Slugger mostly with the Jacob's enhancement. This is going to do the most amount of damage. I've seen Jacob's projectiles when you get that full stacks of Temerario and you've got the 3 stacks of Blazing Barrel on. This will do like a Ricochet will do 300,000 a piece. And then you couple that with incendiary bonus damage and couple that with the corrosive damage. It's doing a ton of damage. It'll wipe out anything you have to shoot. Then some of the other things I talked about, like using a Stray, This is one I showcased it at the beginning. If you didn't see that, go back and check that out. But at the beginning, I was just standing on top of a location in the drill site down in the fade fields, and just using the stray, spraying it doesn't have a whole lot of kick, and the projectiles don't move too slowly, so the increased or the decreased gun handling isn't a big deal. One thing with the hot slugger you'll find, it takes some time getting used to, and the reason I say that is because you can fire a shot and actually, when your cannons are active, actually run faster than the bullets sometimes. So you have to be really close because you'll have a very wide spread on this. Be very close or jump over the top of them and shoot downwards. That seems to work really well, but this does a ton of damage, and when it ricochets, it does an even more amount of damage. You can also use things like a spread launcher under barrel for bossing, but in my opinion, it hasn't worked that well. So it works well on drill site bosses. It'll take them out in one shot easily, but if you have more than one, you need multiple spread launchers. But the overall hot slugger works really well for everything. Then we're also going to use something like a Daedalus shotgun, the bod with the Torgue stickies. Use that with Bullet Buddy Lux for any boss fights. Really, like I said, this is primarily a mobbing build, but it works well for both. And it just absolutely one of the fastest clear times on a drill site I've ever had in any of my builds. So this works out really well if you need to switch to bossing. But going forward, also going to use a fireworks shield with a fire resist if you can get it. That way your missiles that spawn deal fire damage. That way they do bonus incendiary damage, and then double it for our skill tree. We're going to use a Dancer class mod, and like I was talking about, you can also use like a Philanthropo for something like a Stray or a other splash weapons that you may want to use. But overall, the Dancer class mod is giving you the best because it gives you that extra 50% in your Soldado bonus or your overdrive bonuses. Next, I'm going to use a triple bypass. The reason we're going to use this really is because of our specializations. We're going to run now with caffeine, so we want that triple bypass to be able to give us the most amount of action skill cooldown back. Going into firmware, we're going to run Deadeye, 3 of them. That way we get the extra critical hits. Then heating up for the reload speed, because we're using the hot slugger, one shot and need to reload. We want to boost our reload speed. And then the high caliber for the projectile speed. This is really important just because, like I said, the hot slugger has a really slow bullet. So when you fire the shot, if you're from a long ways away, all the enemy needs to do is move just a little bit for it to miss. The projectile speed helps that a little bit, but you're really going to need to play up close and person. This is just mainly hitting targets better and easier. Like I said, if you hit them though, this does a ton of damage. Going into our specializations, we're going to run now with caffeine for the action skill cooldown. We're going to use I'm a Gun for the action skill benefits from gun damage. So because we're running 10 into Temerario, we're getting that 100% bonus damage. And then we're getting the plus 150% and double all overdrive bonuses. So a ton of extra damage for our action skill. So our cannons can do a lot of work with this. I've run a lot of drill sites where between fireworks and my cannons, I didn't even need to fire a shot until the bosses came out. And then a hone mine, get a chance to critically hit with this, just dealing extra damage. Then I'm going to run riddle you this, and that's when you deal gun damage, you increase your gun damage. So again, that gun damage is increasing our individual shots from our hot slugger. That's going to increase our action skill damage from our peacebreaker cannons. Also, if you find yourself not running out of your action skill at any point during an arena, you can switch you can switch now with caffeine to bullet train. That'll give you a little extra gun damage. That'll go into these two as well. So there's a lot of different variations with this build. One last thing I'd like to talk about while we're talking about variations, if you find it too hard to control your weapon with 10 points into Temerario, switch the 5 base points from the skill into Devil May Care and just run the 5 with the class mod. The 5 into Devil May Care gives you a ton of extra health regeneration, which makes survivability really strong with this class. And then you'll get that's also an overdrive skill, so you'll get the extra overdrive bonuses from Soldado. That's it for this build. If you found this helpful, please drop a like and subscribe. I'm on the road to 400 subscribers, which is amazing. Let me know if you have any variations of this build in the comments. See ya!